Hey guys. Well, got a lot more work done than I anticipated in the week-long quarantine so far. And I use quarantine loosely. I know there's still so many people that are saying, if you leave your house, if you go outside, you're a monster and you hate our country and you hate people. What is wrong with people? I just don't know. I mean, I've been going out doing some things here and there, keeping my distance. If I got to go to the grocery store or the gas station or the hardware store, I go in, I touch what I'm going to buy, and I go home. I'm not going window shopping or any of that. If I'm going to spend any time outside working on my house or, taking one of my model airplanes out and flying or go to the airport and do some full-scale flying, that's my business. I'm not hurting nobody. But been spending some time working on the Cub, and we'll get to this in a moment. This is kind of the main reason for this video. Got a lot of work done on the fuselage. Made the modifications to the nose that I had talked about in the last video. I had to push the firewall back in about 1.5 inches to accommodate the DLE-30 engine, and that was a lot of work as far as totally redesigning the whole front of the fuselage. Because obviously the cutout and the notches in here for the pit style muffler. Then once it was all finished, I had to go in and fill in these areas here because the engine's pushed further back. The cowl just barely goes over top of the fuselage here. So I had to kind of make some extensions down here from my original cuts. So the muffler actually fits inside these pieces right here. So it's a really tight but really nice fit. And, it took quite a bit of work. And it's probably hard to see, but it's overly reinforced in there with tri-stock. And because the SIG design, you can see this line right here. This whole section just glues onto this section. I don't know why it wasn't made into the design. I don't know why you just couldn't have, split it right here and just kind of cracked it to make that form, because you can see the nose does go off at an angle. But normally that design would not be a big issue if you were going to be powering this with a 62 stroke or 91 to 124 stroke like most of us did for the past 30 some odd years. But because I'm putting a larger gas engine in there, I need to make sure this was strong. So I glassed it both inside and out. I think I just used just 1 ounce cloth. 2 coats of resin on the inside, 2 coats of resin on the outside, and then one kind of heavier coat of 5-minute epoxy brushed on, then sanded and smoothed, because this is a point of failure for having a large engine with a lot of vibration. So we want to make sure this isn't going to separate. And it's good to go. And I'm sure somebody's going to be wondering what these holes are for. Of course, this hole here is kind of elongated to accommodate the push rod for the throttle servo. But these holes are here so I can get to the screws that hold the top 2 engine mounts on. So I had to get everything done before I could sheet this top area. But I wanted to make sure that if I ever had, a screw come loose, or if I had to take the engine off, for whatever reason, I would have to take these screws out. I want to make sure I can get to them. So I have a former here, and a former here, and then the firewall. And the former that's right here has holes just like this on the inside, so I can literally take a screwdriver and just go straight through. So that turned out nice. A lot of work, by the way. Control surfaces are all done as far as the fuselage. It takes quite a bit of time to get them to get the surfaces nice and round. Get the reinforcement blocks for the control horns put on there, which this is not per the kit. This is just something I did. And these are all glass too. I know a lot of you are probably wondering about that. Can you just glue these in place and call it a day? No, you can't. I mean, you can, but it won't be strong. When I do it, I always glass it too, just to make it nice and strong. And for the elevator, I am going to keep it somewhat old school. Instead of splitting the elevator, I'm just going to do a single servo. So I have one hard point over here where my elevator servo horn's going to be. And for my joiner for the two, they're going to make it so it operates as one. I decided to put just a touch of modern in there, and I used carbon fiber. And of course, using epoxy and micro balloons made it a nice, I filled it in so you can't even tell it's there. And then I wrapped it in glass just to make sure. So it's overly strong, a lot stronger than it would ever need to be. And on the fuselage, because it's going to have a heavier engine, and the cowl is pretty heavy, we'll get to that in a minute, I decided to go ahead and put my two servos for elevator and rudder in the back. So made my own little mounts in there. They're just going to be mounted right onto the exterior, so kind of more modern like you'd see in an ARF. This is not going to be a scale airplane. This is just going to be a smaller version of the my third scale Cub that I have that I did air shows with. So it doesn't need to be scale. And the one over here I got mounted back just a little bit further. And you can obviously see they're on a slight angle. They look like I put them in there crooked. But they're level to the stab. Okay? So if I would have made them level with the stringers on the fuselage, then they would be, you know, kind of facing like this compared to the stab, and we don't want that. Got the cowl all put together. I know I was talking about buying the Fiberglass Specialties cowl, but I love these cowls for the reasons I've already told you. The plastic is thick, it's strong, and as long as you join it together right, I mean, these things are bulletproof. And plus, because it already comes in a two-piece, I needed to make it a little bit wider. Just to ensure that I had enough room, because the Pitts muffler is going to be really close to the inside here. And just dry fitting the cowl, it just barely wanted to wrap around the front of this airplane. So when it was still in two halves, I lined each side with some about that thick of balsa. And then by doing that, by lining both sides with the balsa, made it a lot easier to join the cowls together. So then I could just pinch it together and hold it and start tacking in some thin CA and go all the way around. And obviously that's not strong enough to hold it. So there is, I think, a 2 or a 4 ounce cloth on the inside with 2 coats of resin. And then 1 layer of 3/4 ounce on the outside with 2 coats of resin to blend it in nice. And this thing, if this thing took a nosedive into the ground at 100 miles an hour, I don't think this cowl would break. So I still have to do the final mount, get some cutouts done for it, but I wanted to make sure I got all this done before I did any more work on it, before I started finishing up the nose. And that's about how it's going to set on there. You know, it's not really going to cover the front of the fuselage very much. So that turned out nice. Now, one thing I did want to show you, let me get these out of the way before I end up knocking them on the floor. The Piper Cub has a very distinct and old-fashioned and absolutely beautiful fillet or transition that goes from the fuselage to the vertical fin. And when you look at it right there, you know, there's no support back there. This is just covering. Now, this is not going to be a yellow Cub. The reason for this is my 5th attempt in trying to find out my best method that works for me to be able to cover this. Because when we look at the other side, this is the structure that we have to work with here. You can see I've already done some on this side too, and a couple failed attempts. But as you can see right here, this is all open structure. So to try to have the covering material go flat to here and transition over an open structure to here, all the way across here and wrapping over, because the covering can't stick to anything in here. Okay? It doesn't even stick to anything until about right here. This is where it actually starts sticking to the fin itself. Everything else is unsupported. You can see when I put the camera up there, see how the covering's not actually touching it. So it took quite a few attempts, and this kind of gives you an idea of what I had to work with. But you can see how it makes that nice transition right there. And that took some time. So when it's all finally said and done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of covering, about yay wide. And I'm going to put it right here first. Then when I do this and have my slight overhang, and I make the slits so I can bend it around this concave surface, there'll already be color back there, so I don't have to worry about seeing any wood through there. But this is just a test. So most of it's done with a heat gun. It was wicked. It was wicked to do. Last night when I was trying, I'll be honest, I was already starting to go, I could just fill this in with some balsa and then just cover it flat and make it, But this adds so much character to the airplane right here. I mean, it's just beautiful looking, especially when you look at it from the front. It looks so nice. It kind of takes away from it looking like an ARF. Even though there are some ARFs on the market that do have this setup back here. But I'm happy with it. As I said before, it will not be yellow. It's going to be the traditional Hazel SIG clipped wing cub scheme, so all blue and white. But instead of doing a baby blue instead of doing a baby blue, I'm going to probably do insignia blue, or maybe even royal blue. I'm not sure yet, but it's not going to be the real bright blue. I don't like that, at least not on this airplane. So I just wanted to show that to you. I'm nowhere close to getting ready to cover it yet, but this just had me wanting to do it just to make sure it was going to work out all right. And I'll tell you, last night I was about ready to give up. It was so close. Then I gave it one last shot last night on the other side, and it worked out good. And just about 15 minutes ago, I did this, and it only took maybe 5 or 6 minutes to do. So now I have a method down. It works good. It's gonna work. It's gonna work perfect. And I am a sucker for seams. When I cover an airplane, there's pieces of covering everywhere. But I'm also really good at hiding my seams. So what I'm going to do, just to make it easier on myself, instead of doing all this and half of the top in one piece, I'm going to put somewhere around this area, I'm going to put a balsa support between these two stringers. So I'm going to cover it just like this, but it's going to have a point where I can stop and have something to adhere to, because right now there's nothing underneath, which is why it wrinkles right there in the corner. So that way I can do both sides of the fin just like that. Then when I do the top of the fuselage, I'll cover the top of the fuselage to this point right here. And as long as you do it right, you keep your cuts nice and clean. Seams are not very noticeable. It's not that big a deal. At least they don't bother me. So there we have it. The tail is permanently on there, so it's official. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. If there's any steps that anybody would want further detail into, or something you want to see me do, just let me know. I can't guarantee it'll work that way, but always feel free to ask. So until the next time, later.